Hello, welcome to module number 7, Translating Experiences into Written Accounts. In this module, we will continue to talk about participant observation, but we will also talk about what it means to write about participant observation and some of the ways in which fieldwork gets transformed into an ethnographic written account. This is a very broad topic, and we will be discussing this in different forms in the next few weeks. So, we've already covered different aspects of the research process in itself, how to prepare for it, some of the methods we can use, and the pros and cons of each method. Ethnographic research or fieldwork is central to the anthropological enterprise, but equally important is how we quote-unquote translate our experiences, first into our personal journals and field notes, and second into a more public written account that is accessible for different people. So if we think about the end product of cultural anthropology, that is a book or an article, a particular kind of manuscript describing a particular event or a characteristic of a group, we would conceptualize the entire process as we could say two forms of translation. First, we translate our experiences, our sensory experiences, that is, the things we see, we hear, we smell, we feel, while doing field work, into written notes, right? So this is the when we write field notes, that's the first translation. The second translation happens when we want to use these notes and our memory to write about our experiences in a way that makes sense for people who weren't there. So the field notes make sense for us because we were there and we can remember some of these things, so they don't have to be that organized. In fact, they can be pretty disorganized, and it will still make sense, right? Think about finding an old picture of you or of your family or something. It'll make sense to you, but the picture by itself won't make sense to other people who don't know the context. So sort of the second translation, it's a complicated process because you have to piece together the experiences you had in the field and present them in such a way that other people can relate to them while also getting your point across. So this is the second translation, writing something that people who weren't there will actually be able to understand not only your experience but also the point that you're trying to make. In the two chapters that you read by Van Manen, he attempts to describe the second part of this double translation process. In the first chapter, he emphasizes the idea that an ethnography, the written end product, is a representation of a culture or of selected aspects of a culture. What does he mean by this? First, it means that ethnography, the written account, is not the culture itself, nor the experience of the anthropologist. This might sound simple enough, but think about the way in which language works. The word rabbit might represent a rabbit, but it is not a rabbit. In fact, the word rabbit might represent different kinds of rabbits for different people. Van Manen also says that culture is not itself visible, and that this presents another challenge for representing culture through written language. So here we have three different signs that represent a rabbit, right? But none of them are a rabbit. But rabbit is a concept that we can actually see. So when we're talking about culture, this is something that it's not visible. So it is even harder to represent it. So in this case, think about the concept of hunger. Hunger, feeling hungry, is not visible either, but we can find ways to represent it both visually and textually. The challenge of ethnography is to create a representation of fieldwork that speaks both about your experiences as an anthropologist and also about your ideas. Van Manen argues that anthropologists often write realist tales to validate their ethnography. There are other ways to write ethnographies that are not based on realist accounts, but the main way to write ethnography is through providing a realist account, or in Van Manen's words, a realist tale. The issue with the realist tale is that you have to be able to convince the people reading your work that you were not only there, in your field site, but that you actually know what you're saying, what you're talking about. The people reading your work should be able to trust that you are telling a truthful account of something that they will never experience, right? So this is the challenge. So Van Manen argues that there are 4 ways in which the anthropologist can construct this credibility. Some of them I agree with, but others are a little bit outdated in my opinion, and we will talk about this later on. First, Van Manen mentions experiential authority. He claims that anthropologists often talk about the people they are studying, but they remove themselves from their own text. They don't talk about what they were doing or not doing, who told them what, or who ignored them. Rather, anthropologists are absent from their text because this is believed to enhance objectivity. Like Van Manen says, the conventions of ethnography change over time, and this is no longer true. These days, anthropologists often write in first person and are very clear about what they are doing and who they are talking about and who they are talking to. This doesn't mean that anthropologists are no longer using the realist tale, though. Rather, it means that anthropologists have changed the ways in which these realist tales are told. Van Manen also talks about the typical forms. That is, the very explicit and documentary-like presentation of the mundane. Anthropologists validate their work by showing details that might reflect intimacy and an established presence in their field site. This is something that continues to be important. Anthropologists continue to describe daily and intimate activities that might not seem relevant to show both that they were there, but also that they can be trusted to paint a picture of the thing they are talking about. So when anthropologists are talking about every morning I woke up and did this, or the person I was living with woke up every morning and did this might not seem very important, but this is a way in which the anthropologists claim that they know what they're talking about by these sort of mundane daily activities. Another thing that Van Manen mentions, which is even more important today, is a representation of the native's point of view. This is often done by transcribing directly the conversations or interviews that are relevant. Of course, although here it would seem that there's no translation happening, when you just sort of cut and paste, right, parts of particular interviews or conversations, you should remember that anthropologists edit a lot of this data, and a lot of the conversations you find in the text, the anthropologists have looked at them for a long time in trying to find the right segment to support a particular claim, right? So although this might be verbatim, this might be literally what the other person said, there's still a lot of editing behind what gets included in that ethnography and what doesn't. So although it is a quote-unquote native speaking, the anthropologist still gets to manipulate this conversation and to include what he or she wants. This ability to pick and choose by the anthropologist is what Van Manen calls the interpretive omnipotence, which more or less means that when the anthropologist is making that second translation from field notes to book or to article, she does it in an arbitrary way that fits the point that she is trying to make. This does not mean that anthropologists make things up, or that they are lying about fieldwork just to prove a point. It means that fieldwork is so vast, and there are so many things that you could say about fieldwork that you have to select which work best for you. This will also happen when you do your mini ethnography. You will find that there are things that you might think are important, but that you will leave out, and things that you think aren't important and that you might include. Like with all good translations, some things are meant to be lost and some things will acquire new meanings. So when we think about the entire process of creating an ethnography, think about this way of sort of separating things first. So when you go to the field, you'll have all of these experiences, and then you'll try to sort of separate them by categories, by different categories in different ways. We'll talk more about this in when we talk about coding, but in this case, what is happening is that you're actually breaking real experience into different groups, breaking it up, and then when you're trying to write the ethnography, you're recombining some of these different elements, not all of them, and you try to give coherence to a text.